Age of Overlord is gonna be a set that's gonna change the game a lot, because there are just so many cards in there that are really good. For example, SP Little Knight is in there, and this card is gonna see play in basically every extra deck, even in Labyrinth. I mean, it's basically a fusion of Nightmare Unicorn and DPE, and it's kinda crazy. But also there are the Horus cards that are good because they're basically an insanely good rank 8 engine, so you can turbo out cards like Zombie Vampire or Coach King Giant Trainer. Then there's also the Anti-Zeus, that's pretty strong, but has many restrictions, so it probably won't see as much play, but it's still gonna see play in decks like Labyrinth for sure. And also cards like the new Chimera Fusion monster, Beyond the Pendulum turns into a Link 3, new good Manadium Synchro, Angel Swing for Infernoble so they can negate Dark Hole no more and Droplet, and also cards like Dark Hole, Essence Dragon are in there. But there's one engine in the set that I want to talk about that's definitely gonna have meta impact, and that's the Diabellestar or the Sinful Spoils package. The package is actually not that big. There are basically just 6 cards you could play in the engine, and that's 1 monster, 4 spells, and 1 trap, with one of those already being legal in the TCG. And the main card of this engine is Diabellestar the Dark Witch, and this card is not only gonna have way too much degenerate fan art, but is also really good. Her first effect allows her to spell summon herself from hand by sending 1 card from her hand or field to the graveyard. So she's already in free, but you can just resummon really easily if you draw her, and you can also trigger some card effects in decks, for example T-Elements. But the really good part comes now, because if she's summoned, you can basically just set 1 Sinful Spoils spell trap directly from your deck. So she's already in Stratos, and as long as the spells and traps of the deck are good, it's 17 good effect, and spoiler, all of the cards are basically really good. She also has a third effect that if she's sent to the graveyard during your opponent's turn, you can just special summon her back by sending 1 card from her hand or field to the graveyard again. So you can trigger even more cards in T-Elements. But to be able to see how good this card really is, you need to see how good the spells and traps are. So let's get to the spells and traps of the engine. And the first of those is the Sinful Spoils Hunter Fiend. And first of all, it's a quick play spell, so you don't really want to set this card with your Diabellestar, except it's your last target. This part probably won't matter though, because the first effect of this card reads as follows. Add 1 Diabellestar monster from a deck or graveyard to your hand. So it's just more copies of Diabellestar, and it's even better than Eroder because you can also add a card back from the graveyard, so the engine doesn't really need to play multiple Diabellestars. The only real bad part here is that the card is able to get belt because you can add cards back from the graveyard, so it makes the card a little bit worse in that scenario. The inconsistency tool to search for Diabellestar would already be enough to see play because Diabellestar is a really good monster, but the card also has a second effect that's really crazy. Because you can also banish this card from the graveyard and target one of your Sinful Spoils spells or traps that's banished or in your graveyard, you place it on the bottom of your deck and then you draw 1 card. So you can recycle the targets you want to set with Diabellestar, what's really good for recursion, and you also get a free draw with the card, so it's kinda like Engage if you think about it. But let's get to the cards that actually do something and are not just consistency tools, and the first of those is the Sinful Spoils Snake Eye. This card allows you to send 1 other face-up card you control to the graveyard and then special summon 1 level 1 fire monster from your hand or deck. So this card already is basically just a better version of 1 for 1, but it needs to be a fire monster. And this is also probably the card that's gonna see the most play with Diabellestar, just because this card gives some decks an insane consistency boost. The best example here is Rescue Ace. Because Rescue Ace just needs Hydrant to play, and Hydrant is a level 1 fire monster, so if you really want, you can play up to 9 more copies of Hydrant with this engine. The new Snake Eye archetype has like 3 different level 1 monsters that you could summon with this card. Infernoble Knights also have like 5 targets you could summon with this engine, but the most important would probably be Ricardetto and Renode. And also, what's really great with this engine in Infernoble is that you can use Phoenix Blade as the cost for all of your cards. So you don't even need to waste resources. You can also really easily use your Diabellestar as an extender, then summon Dolphin, and then go into Appaloosa and summon Ricardetto and start playing from there. But this video shouldn't be about Infernoble, even though I love talking about this deck. Because there's new Infernoble support, it's probably also worth mentioning that you can summon Decatron with this, what definitely sounds nice. The new Real Killings probably could also use this card, but I think they're not that crazy. Also, there's a new level 1 Fire King monster that seems kinda busted for the archetype, so that's definitely nice that you can summon this one from the deck with it. I think TG is also getting a new level 1 fire monster that's kinda good, so that's also decent. And the most generic one of those is probably Jet Synchron, because you just can easily summon a Synchro 8 with your Diabellestar and then climb to a Synchro 9 with it. But because Pepega is banned here in TCG, T-Elements probably won't be as crazy with this engine. Those should probably be the best targets for now. But if you really want, you can also summon stuff like Red Potent. But because a better 1 for 1 isn't good enough, there's also a second effect for the card. You can banish this card from your graveyard and target 1 Snake Eye or Diabellestar monster in your graveyard, then you add 1 little fire monster from your deck to your hand and place the target monster on the bottom of the deck. So it's not just 1 for 1, but also if you keep the card in your graveyard, you can just search follow-up during your next turn. And having hydrants for 2 turns seems kinda nice. Sinful Spoil of Subversion Snake Eye is the next card, and this card is actually pretty simple. You just target one face-up monster on the field and place it in its owner's spell and trap zone as a continuous spell. So it's just really unique removal. And if you compare this card to a card like Dracoback, it's just way better, because even if you hard draw this card going second, it's just removal that you can use. And if you want to draw Dracoback, you need to have a token you can equip with the card to get a bounce, and Dracoback is just really horrible to draw. It's still probably not a card that you want in main deck, because it's only good if you're going second, but it's definitely a really good option to have for the side deck if you're going second. Sinful Spoils of Doom Luciela is probably the worst of the Sinful Spoils spells and traps, but it's still not even that bad. The card allows you to target one level 7 or higher spellcaster you control and then apply 2 effects in sequence. The first effect being that the face-up monster you target is unaffected by other monsters' effect during this turn, but it's sent to the graveyard during the standby phase of the next turn. And then all face-up monsters your opponent currently control lose ATK equal to the ATK of the target monster, and if any of those monsters' ATK is reduced to 0, all of those monsters will be destroyed. And because Diabellestar has 2500 ATK, most of the times this card can basically just be a quick play Raigeki. If you use the card during your turn, the card is actually even better, because then your Diabellestar is sent to the graveyard during your opponent's turn, and then during your opponent's turn, you can trigger the effect of Diabellestar and just resummon her and get another card. The biggest reason why this card is probably not as good is that you need to keep the Diabellestar on board to use the effect as an interruption. And most of the time you just want to use her as synchro material, link material, or as any other material for some. But then to the last card of the engine, and that's the Sinful Spoils of Betrayal, Silvia. And because it's a trap, you can already see that the card is probably just gonna be good if you're going first. The effect of the card is that you can send one Diabellestar monster from your hand or face-up field to the graveyard and target one face-up card on the field to negate its effects. So it's basically a hot threat negation, what's definitely a really good interruption, especially because it doesn't negate the activation. It's crazy good against cards like Branded Fusion. Also, similar to the quick play spell, you will be able to resummon the Diabellestar with her effect and get another card from the deck. And then there's also another effect of the card that allows you to banish this card from the graveyard if your opponent activates a card or effect in response to the activation of a Diabellestar's monster's effect or Sinful Spoils spell trap card or effect. Then you simply negate that opponent's effect. This might not be the craziest effect, but it's still just a really solid secondary effect from the graveyard. This card is very similar to the Snake Eye removal spell from this archetype in the way that you basically don't want to main this card, because it's only good if you're going first and not good if you're going second. But it's a really good option for decks that can't really negate cards like Dark Ruler no more or Forbidden Droplet, so you can set this card and use it to counter those cards, or just in general as negation for decks like Branded. But like the other spell, the biggest problem with this card is also that you want to keep your Diabellestar on the board, and you mostly want to use it as material for other summons. I think there should be enough as an explanation for the cards, and it shouldn't be too hard to see why this engine is so good. It just enables so many things, like for example easy synchro 8 or 9 plays, extreme consistency for decks like Rescue Ace, potential negations for Dark Ruler or even Droplet, good removal for going second. All of that while giving a good recovery for a second turn, with cards like for example the 1/1 has the second effect in the graveyard, or even the resummon effect of Diabellestar. Then there's the fact that you get a free draw with your quick play, that's basically gonna be like Engage in that case. But what I really like about this engine is that many cards in this engine just really work on their own. For example, the 1/1 spell, you could just play it in the decks that it's good in, without the other cards of the Diabellestar engine, and would still be fine. Or the removal spell, it's just solid removal going second. What's also really great about this engine is that you can play it really compactly. You could just play one Diabellestar, 3 of the quick play, and 1 of whatever search target you want, and it would be fine. If you now take the Adventurer engine and compare it to this engine, it just seems so bad. Because all of the cards in the Adventure engine just really bad bricks. Like for sure, if you draw a Fateful Adventure, you can search your Rite of Aramis here, and it's fine, but it's not really great. Then Griffin is just a body that you can special summon if you draw it, and even worse, Dracoback is completely worth it if you draw it without the other engine. So I like the design of this engine way more than the Adventurer engine. But what do you think about the Sinful Spoil engine? Do you think it will boost Rescue Ace to the top of the meta, or do you think it's gonna flop a little bit because you don't have Prepagia Ruler that we can summon with Jet Synchro? Write your opinion down in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video, you could consider leaving a like, and if you want to see more content like this, consider subscribing to my channel. And then yeah, see you soon in the next video.